Zac Taylor's completed his final media availability of the 2021 season on the heels of a fresh big extension. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We've been covering the Bengals for a while here on the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available anywhere you get your podcasts, free and on YouTube. We're all over the place. Find James on Twitter at James Rapien. Find me at Jake Liscow for all of your Bengals content. And James, Zac Taylor has been extended. We're going to start there. We're going to talk about some of the Bengals' key free agents coming up this offseason as well, because coming off a Super Bowl loss, a lot of teams actually are fine. This idea of a Super Bowl hangover, I looked into it a little bit this morning. I asked people for research, and one of the things that goes into it, and we'll have a lot of time to talk about it, is keeping your good players together and then building on it. And so we're going to take a look at which good players the Bengals have to keep together in 2022. But let's start with the contract extension for head coach Zac Taylor. I don't see any way this wasn't happening. This was in the works for a while. Malik Wright even went so far as to say, and we're going to try to get him on the show in the near future if we can, that the coordinators' extensions were done some time ago. Taylor, though, 4-year extension, under contract now for 5 more seasons through the 2026 season. And I guess when you take your team to the Super Bowl, that's what you get. There are a lot of people, though, James, that are not still to this day to a Super Bowl loss, still not thrilled with Zac Taylor. But for me, this extension does make sense. And I think there's a lot to talk about with it and a lot of angles to discuss, but the Bengals got it done.
Yeah, and they were going to get it done. It was something that was going to get done. Malik's right. They get it, Malik right. Malik's right. They had the Callahan and Anarumo extensions basically done after those guys interviewed for other head coaching jobs, and it was clear they were staying. And so that was going to happen. Taylor was going to get extended. Was he going to get 4 years? Had they just beat the Raiders, or something like that? Maybe not. Or had they lost to the Raiders? Maybe not 4. He was getting extended, though. It was a successful season in the front office's eyes, and I understand it. And so you can look at it 2 ways to me with this extension. You can look at it as, and we've talked about all the gripes with Super Bowl 56, the personnel decisions, right? The play calling, having Mixon on the bench in critical moments, and Zac Taylor owning up to that on Wednesday. All of those things. And you could either say, one, why the hell would you give him that long of an extension given those mistakes on the biggest stage? Or 2, this is a head coach that has clearly shown a progression from when he started to where he is right now as a head coach after 3 seasons. And I do think he's getting better. I do think he's improving. And I think as a 38-year-old, he's shown the ability to adapt, change, and get better. And so you can be a pessimist, right, and say, well, why the hell would you give him that? Or B, you could say, okay, well, I see the vision. Clearly, he's gotten better every year. And if this continues and the roster gets better, you want to see what he would be like with a better offensive line as a play caller. Then you see the vision regardless. So I think there's 2 ways you can look at it. But either way, I think everybody knows that this was coming, and it should. He does deserve an extension. He shouldn't go into 2022 as a lame duck coach after going 10-7 and taking his team to the Super Bowl. That being said, despite what he did this season, I do think it's fair to say, is he going to be the guy that gets this team not to a Super Bowl, but win a Super Bowl? I get having reservations about Zac Taylor still. But he's shown that progression, that upward trajectory, and that has to be what the Bengals front office saw when they gave him this deal.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things to talk about with a head coach. And with Zac Taylor specifically, he calls the plays on offense. And that is the most highly scrutinized thing, it seems like, besides maybe timeout usage or something like that for a head coach in football. And you're right. There have been times that he's been under criticism fairly, and in my opinion, sometimes when he's been under criticism unfairly for some of the choices that he's made in game. The Mixon not being on the field thing for the final drive is going to drive us nuts for a while. And, go back to the San Francisco game, the choice not to put the ball in Burrow's hand on third down. You think they repeated that mistake with Samaje Perine in the Super Bowl? Maybe you're right, maybe not. Again, I think I said this after the game, could see the idea of running the ball there. It's 3rd and 1. You should be able to convert a 1-yard gain, and Perine nearly did. I was wrong when I said that he did on replay. It was actually, I was watching the replay on my phone. It's his hand not carrying the ball that gets past the line of scrimmage. It was still a bad spot for what it's worth. But anyway, I digress. You can have your qualms with Taylor's play calling, but where it was unfair to me, James, is we talked about this all playoffs long. They're not calling the offense they want to call. They're not running the offense they want to run. Everything is a 3-step drop. And I made the mistake on Wednesday or decision of watching JT O'Sullivan's Joe Burrow breakdown from the Super Bowl. And even in the Super Bowl, I'm thinking, man, if Joe Burrow's confident in his offensive line, like not just saying he's confident, but actually confident, and they can call 5-step, 7-step drops, and Joe Burrow can actually work the backside of some of these plays, and you can actually, instead of just running mirrored concepts, running dragon on both sides of the field, you can actually have a backside concept, which is where the Rams killed the Bengals in the Super Bowl on some of those over routes. So like Odell Beckham, for example, for a big play. Cooper Kupp got one too, I think. Joe Burrow's going to take a step. He's going to level up. And he was already really good this year. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, is it the play calling or is it the personnel decisions? And obviously some of the decisions about the offensive line fall on Zac Taylor and this coaching staff because they're highly involved with the front office in Cincinnati. We know that. But it's just such a back and forth, right? That it makes you wonder how much better he can be or would be if he has an offensive line. He's admitted that he's made mistakes. You would like to think he'd learn from them. And he said it himself. He would like to think that head coaches are allowed to improve as well. And that's what the Bengals are banking on here because the culture is A+ fantastic. And that's a big part of head coaching too. He's going to get scrutinized for the play calling stuff, and fair enough, that's his job. But the culture he's created shouldn't be overlooked either. And I think that everyone can agree that that is absolutely fantastic.
And that's why the biggest reason for optimism is how the culture has changed and how the Jim Turners are gone and how it feels like everybody's bought in and Lou Anarumo's evolution and all of these things. Right. So again, much like a Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase and T Higgins, right. That trio, you would hope that Zac Taylor, Brian Callahan, Lou Anarumo would just continue to slowly get better and continue to progress and continue to improve. And if they do, well, man, we saw what Lou Anarumo can do with guys that he feels confident in. We saw what Brian Callahan could do, dialing up different plays and really being an extension of Zac Taylor, how they work. And so I think the potential's there, but it's going to come back to the offensive line all offseason long, right? And so that's the part of it that we're going to have to talk about, that we're going to cover, and that we're going to discuss for the next couple of months. And even after that, probably, regardless of the moves we make or they make, we're still going to be talking about how that's going to impact the trenches, because that's the next key to unlocking this team. And a couple key offensive linemen are free agents, at least key as in starters this season. We'll dive into those guys and more next, right here on Locked On Bengals. But first, a word from BetOnline.net, because football season, well, it's over, but basketball is full steam ahead with the NBA, with the college game, March Madness right around the corner. And, well, you can get all the latest odds, player performance props, where the next fired head coach is going to land, all in one spot. BetOnline.net, the number one spot for all of your betting needs. And right now, they got not just basketball coverage. No, they got hockey. They got boxing. They have UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action at betonline.net, where the game starts.
Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. We've been saying it for 3 years, and we're going to keep saying it. Let's start there for the Bengals free agents. Riley Reiff, Quinton Spain, the two big free agents for the Bengals on the offensive line. Fred Johnson, technically also a restricted free agent, by the way. Wouldn't shock me if the Bengals don't tender Fred Johnson as a restricted free agent. And I can't remember the last time. I'm sure this has happened. I just can't remember it. The last time the Bengals non-tendered an RFA. Doesn't really matter, I guess, too much in this case. But the big questions will be Riley Reiff and Quinton Spain.
Yeah.
Because with this offensive line, I think everyone's looking for 4 new starters, 3 new starters, 2 new starters. And those questions start with, do the Bengals think Riley Reiff has another year? Do the Bengals think Quinton Spain has another year? Because Quinton Spain, while he started the year great and wasn't bad by any means, did have his ups and downs this year, especially as the year wore on. Those are 2 big decisions for this team in the trenches at the most important position for this team in the offseason.
Well, 4th and 1, Quinton Spain, we talked about it with Sands on Wednesday's show. You need to check that one out. You can't get beat to the outside, right? He had help on the inside with Hopkins, and he got beat to the outside. Spain, that can't happen. And that's why Jeffrey Simmons came at him on Twitter and all that. Like, I get it's Aaron Donald. I do. I understand it. But that was the one spot you couldn't get beat, right? So to me, and this is just how I view Quinton Spain, he's a backup. And so, you know, if you need him to start, that's great. And if he's your worst starter, that's fine. But he's their second best starting offensive lineman going into that game. Like he was for most of the year. And you know, I get it. Trey Hopkins was playing better, but Isaiah Prince and the right guard, just craziness. Quinton Spain was at worst their second best guard or second best offensive lineman behind Jonah. And maybe you'd have him ahead of Jonah or whatever. That's fine. Take it or leave it, whatever. But to me, I view him like as a low end starter. If you have to, so if he's your lone starter, you're bringing back at the guard spot and you're replacing, you know, center, right guard, right tackle, that's okay. If you sign Riley Reiff to a 1-year deal, I'm not against it, but that means that you've invested heavily on the interior unless you plan on playing him inside. And I don't think they would do that, by the way. They already moved him from left tackle to right tackle this year. I don't think they would keep moving him. Maybe they do, you know, and they go that route. But yeah, I'm okay with both guys being back. But if they're both back and essentially sharpied as starters at the positions they started at already, like, that's tough, man. And if it's a new left guard, a new right guard, a new center, and it's Riley Reiff at right tackle, I think that's fine, right? If there's one of those guys. But if both are just in there as starting linemen and like in your projected 53-man you know, roster, and those are the guys that are starting, I think that's going to be a bit underwhelming. What say you?
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my reaction. James can see my reaction.
I was looking at the camera. I didn't see you too well. So
I'm having a hard time keeping it together. I mean, Quinton Spain got paid $1 million last year. That's backup money. That's veteran backup money. He played. The Bengals got great value for that money. If Quinton Spain wants to come back on that deal, fine. And I feel like it wasn't like a huge priority for the Bengals to bring him back last year. He played better this year for sure. He's in a contract year again, right? He's 30 years old. He's or almost 30 years old, trying to get another contract or two, bag a couple more $1 million before he's done in the NFL. I'm fine with him back for similar money. I'm not trying to invest heavily in Quinton Spain. I mean, I feel kind of bad saying it. I like him. I like him as a Bengal. I like him as a left guard. I'm shooting a little bit higher than a couple guys, a couple veterans that are probably on 1-year deals. And I hope the Bengals are shooting a little bit higher here too. I don't think Quinton Spain is going to really want to come back on a prove it deal again. I think he's looking for, you know, that contract, and somebody might give him an opportunity to start. I don't know. He did put Aaron Donald on his face a couple times, or at least once. That was kind of cool. But you're right. When it counted, he didn't make that play, and that's kind of what you get with him. He's making a lot of plays, and other times he's missing some plays. I don't think he's a perfect scheme fit for what they want to do running the ball, although he was fine in that area. But yeah, I don't know. It's just not very exciting, right? I'm looking for exciting. Like last year, our standard for the offensive line was be okay. They were okay for part of the year, and then they weren't okay anymore.
Yeah.
And this year, the standard is higher because Joe Burrow has a knee injury again. I mean, how are we back here? I mean, it's not a severe MCL sprain, according to Zac Taylor. Should be fine.
Yeah.
Obviously, didn't leave the game, was able to walk, didn't have to have his knee immobilized or any of this stuff. But I mean, we can't be doing this again. We can't be talking about another 100-hit year for Joe Burrow. I mean, it's just unacceptable. And so it's not very exciting, those two guys. And the other big name on offense, James, is there anything else you wanted to throw in on those two guys?
Yeah, just the depth.
Yeah.
I'm fine with bringing both back. You need depth, okay? You can't be turning to Isaiah Prince or banking on a rookie who had discipline issues in Jackson Carman. And by discipline, I mean work ethic concerns. To make a transition from college left tackle to right guard, where it's much different on the inside. Any offensive lineman will tell you that it's much faster. It's tougher against some of these guys. Or not necessarily tough. It's just different to be a day one starter. You can't do that. And so bringing those guys back would be great, especially if you're going to draft a rookie and expect them to play right away at either tackle spot. But then at the same time, to your point, I think it's about spending money and throwing money at the problem. The same way they did defense. It's not like they've drafted great on defense. They threw money at that problem, and they got it right. They got to do the same thing on the offensive line. Go ahead with the other offensive player you want to talk about.
Yeah, the big thing there you said that I really agree with is they have to get it right. The other guy is CJ Uzomah, right? They have some minor free agents. Mike Thomas, we'll see if he's back, was a good special teamer. Joe Burrow likes him. You talked about that a few times this year. Stanley Morgan is a restricted free agent, so they will almost certainly tender Stanley Morgan, I think. I don't think that's going to be a Fred Johnson situation. Auden Tate, also a free agent. I think we can count his days in Cincinnati as complete, for better or for worse. Trenton Irwin, exclusive rights free agent for the Bengals. So that's, I think, it on the offensive side of the ball. Brandon Allen. And I think that at some point, maybe not today, we talk about whether, this is a year to invest in a little bit of a higher end backup quarterback, a Blaine Gabbert type or a Marcus Mariota type instead of a Brandon Allen. But we'll come back to that. CJ Uzomah is a guy that I thought, early in the season, this, I thought his days in Cincinnati were as good as done. I thought this was going to be it for him. This was going to be his last season. And since that time, he has really, in my opinion, embraced a big leadership role on this team. And part of that is, he is right in the middle of this tight locker room. He got paid about, $6 million in 2021. His cap hit was just over $6 million. I am not aware of any additional bonuses that he earned. Got some game day active bonuses. But what kind of contract are you willing to give CJ Uzomah to come back? Because I would like to see him back at this point. I would like to see the tight end room added to it as well, but I would like CJ Uzomah to be back.
Yeah, I'm willing to bring him back for sure, because I think he's a big part of it. To me, it's 1 to 2 years, right? In that 6 minute, like if you can get him for 2 years, 12, like I'm okay with that. I think that's okay. I think anything past that, and maybe it's 3 years and that third year is just, there's nothing there, because I think some teams will be interested in him in like his personality and like what he brings as a pass catcher and as a blocker. And I think that's valuable, especially when you're going to have a lot of turnover in the trenches, right? You expect that. And I'm not saying they don't need another tight end. I wouldn't mind them looking at another one, right? You know, if Rob Gronkowski really wants to come to Cincinnati, well, hey, Rob, let's go, man, because you could be a little bit of a weapon here, and I'll show you all the cool spots because there's plenty to do in Cincinnati, and you'll get your fair share of Built Bars. But even then, like even if you brought in someone like that, or even if you drafted a mid-round tight end, it would still be good to have CJ Uzomah. You know, and so that's what I would come back to. So I'm not breaking the bank for him. I'm not giving him a ton. But I think 2 years, 12, I think he'd probably be happy with that because he gets to play with the guy he calls franchise.
Yeah. I mean, the challenging thing about tight end is from an on-field perspective, I think that there are some options that could do what CJ Uzomah does. Like, you know, there are a lot of good tight ends as free agents this year. Mike Gesicki, Dalton Schultz, Rob Gronkowski on the high end, David Njoku if you want to bet on the athleticism, Zach Ertz for the veteran that you love, Gerald Everett, Evan Engram, Max Williams. I mean, Mo Alley Cox, who's a guy that may be underused in Indianapolis, like Bob Tonyan, who got famous last year in Green Bay. Like, there's a lot of guys there. So how important is CJ Uzomah's locker room presence is a question.
And maybe I'm shooting too high with that number, right? Because you're right. A lot of those guys, you said them, and I'm like, ooh. And we'll talk about them at a later date. But I'm like, oh. And so that's the thing. Like, if I'm signing Uzomah, it's not necessarily stopping me from going after one of those other guys, if that makes sense. Because I do think that they could use two tight ends that aren't Uzomah and not necessarily him, but Drew Sample.
Yeah. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. We'll get to the defensive free agents for the Cincinnati Bengals, where I think the decisions are a little bit harder in some places and one that should make itself coming up next. James, Jessie Bates is the marquee free agent on the defensive side of the ball. For completion's sake, let's just hit all of them real quick, and we'll talk about a few of them in greater depth. But in order, I think, of intrigue and priority, Jessie Bates, BJ Hill, Larry Ogunjobi, Josh Tupou, Ricardo Allen, Eli Apple, and then it kind of gets into some contributors: Trey Flowers, Jalen Davis, Jordan Evans. I don't think Vernon Hargreaves is back, and Darius Phillips, who I don't think is back either. The one exclusive rights or restricted free agent on the defensive side of the ball is Wyatt Ray. So he'll get a chance to make the team again next year, and I think he deserves it. I think he was a serviceable rotational piece, but I'm also looking for the Bengals to get better in the trenches if you've paid any attention to my tweets. But Jessie Bates is top of mind. The franchise tag for safeties this year is projected to be right around the $13 million mark. The Bengals will, at the very worst, I believe, franchise tag Jessie Bates. I think they'll try to get an extension done, but the extension, to be fair to the Bengals, would have a higher annual average value than the franchise tag, which is maybe why this becomes a little bit tricky. Jessie Bates admitted himself that the contract stuff was distracting him early in the year. We didn't see 2020 Jessie Bates until the playoffs, but then we saw 2020 Jessie Bates in the playoffs. And then it's like, okay, you just get it done, right? And it wouldn't surprise me to see him play on the franchise tag, James, because the kind of money he wants, and we talked about it last offseason with the agent he has, the Bengals might still balk at that, especially if they are prioritizing the offensive line. But either way, Jessie Bates is going to be a Bengal next year, I think.
No, they'll franchise tag him, and I think that's the most likely scenario as we sit here today. Because of that, why would the Bengals agree to pay X amount guaranteed, $18 million plus per? And I get the locker room precedents and all. I do in how the cap could go up or will go up, and his number could go up. All of those things, but and this is the thing, man. You're not going to like this. Fans are not going to like this. He was underwhelming for most of the year, and it's not just about the playoffs. And he dropped the pick six against the 49ers, and he had those issues like that. It does matter. And so if you're still asking for the same number that you were asking before the season, when the Bengals said, go prove it again, go show you're a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro, and then you didn't do it, even if you were great in 4 games in the playoffs, and I get it, I understand it, and everyone saw those recently, I would be surprised if the Bengals are like, oh, you're right, Jesse. We're going to make you the highest paid safety in the NFL or the second highest paid safety in the NFL when they have the control. They'll just franchise tag him, and it'll be prove it. That'll be what they say, just like they did last year. He's still young, right? So I if I had to like put betonline.net odds on it, I would say that that's the most likely. And I'll actually think about the odds and give them to you later. But as far as that, I think franchise tag is most likely, deal done second most likely for those wondering, and then third is just letting him hit free agency. I don't see the Bengals doing that because he's an asset and he's obviously a valuable part of the team.
Yeah, I think that's actually fourth. I think third would be a franchise and trade. Like, I think the franchise is happening, and he's either going to play on the franchise tag, they're going to extend him, or he'll get traded. I think there's no way they just say, you know what, go have fun in free agent. Like, there's no way that happens, right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they would trade him either, though. So they could be tied because they just
distant.
That's not
distant 3 and 4. I mean, unless it really came to an impasse, I think but hopefully that doesn't happen. The issue with safety is that the Seahawks gave Jamal Adams all that damn money. I mean, it just really screwed up the safety market. Because if we're talking like 14, 15 million for Jessie Bates, like that's a lot more palatable than 18 million. And I'm on the side of the players. Like, I want to see Jessie Bates get his and get paid, but the Bengals need to put every cent they can into the offensive line. And that means that they might need to do some work to mitigate the cap hit for Jessie Bates, which might lead to the franchise tag, as we're discussing, to save $1 million. But the other thing is that when you do the extension, the cap hits in year one can be lower, and they can manage the cap hit in year one. So that is something that the Bengals will have to consider as well as they try to manage the cap and their cash spend and all these things, because they do have to maximize the window they're in. And Jessie Bates, Von Bell, great safety pairing, will be a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. You have to maximize. And we'll have plenty of time, plenty of analysts on to talk about that, break down the cap, break down all of those things for you. So that's why you come here to Locked On Bengals. So don't worry, we got you covered there. But the Bates, again, I come back to it. I just don't know if the Bengals are going to say, you proved us, or you proved yourself right. You did enough to get that, when they have the leverage. Like that's the beauty in it. They have the leverage in their mind, because of course, go get paid, Jesse.
I do wonder if the playoff run changes things for them, because he was just nails in the playoffs, right? Like he still had the tackling issues, right? Like he missed a tackle on a big Cooper Cup run after catch or something in the Super Bowl. And so that came up here and there, and that's just going to be probably part of how he plays. But he was really good in the playoffs, great in the playoffs. And so it'll be interesting. That'll be fun to see if they just pony up the money or what they try to do there. It'll also be really interesting to see, just as like a general note, how they structure contracts this offseason. We talked about this a lot going into free agency last year. We talked about the unique opportunity the Bengals had to change the way they structure deals a little bit, to put more of the cap hit on the tail end, with the cap projected to go up so much. We'll see if the Bengals do any of that this year. They've also got 3 defensive tackle free agents that I think need to be a priority, at least 1 or 2 of them. I would like to see the Bengals acquire 3 tech too. I wouldn't be opposed to the Bengals drafting a defensive tackle in the first round, but we're not talking about the draft quite yet. That's going to be coming soon. The draft just 10 weeks away, a couple months away. Larry Ogunjobi, Josh Tupou, and BJ Hill. I've been on the extend BJ Hill train all year. He's just about 27 years old. Larry Ogunjobi is 28 years old. Josh Tupou is 28 years old. Ogunjobi, I assume, would command the biggest contract out of these guys just because of the sack numbers. He had the Pro Bowl votes. But I'm still on the extend BJ Hill train, and Larry Ogunjobi's injury could complicate things. But beyond DJ Reader, there's like nothing. There's Tyler Shelvin, and there's virtually nothing, right? And so one of these guys, at least, I think, needs to be back for 2022. And I think that's going to be an interesting decision for this front office to make.
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't be shocked if they're both back with that Larry Ogunjobi injury. I think it does complicate it a little bit. I don't know if he's going to get huge dollars. because of the inconsistency that he showed. And who knows, when you add that injury to it, maybe, teams aren't willing to give up huge money. BJ Hill, I agree. I mean, you want to prioritize him. What a steal he was in the Billy Price trade. So yeah, I think there's certainly a path where both of those guys come back, but certainly Hill, to me, and maybe again, maybe a teams will value him more because they watch it that closely and that in depth versus a guy like Ogunjobi. But from a fan perspective, and not even that, like a Q rating perspective and a profile perspective, I think Larry Ogunjobi is a bigger name. But I would be shocked if the Bengals didn't have Hill slightly higher on their priority list.
What is a Q rating?
Q score is like celebrities. Like celebrities have it, and so like,
okay.
Are you a villain? Are you the yeah.
Got it.
So you're the villain. I'm the hero.
Of course. Yeah, I think one or two of those guys back. Everyone knows I love Josh Tupou. I do think that maybe a little redundant, but was really helpful to have Josh and even Zach Kerr, right? Like it was helpful to have some of these bigger guys for like the Titans matchup. And I think the Bengals really enjoyed that flexibility they had with defensive tackle. What they're really missing is a Geno Atkins type. And the Geno Atkins type is really rare and hard to find. The Javon Hargrave type, the Aaron Donald type, the penetrating 3-tech who can create havoc in the backfield. Ogunjobi does that. Not at the level of some of these other guys. The splash plays fantastic, great, game-changing at times. But like you said, James, needs to be a little bit more consistency there. The only other guys to really talk about, I think, are Eli Apple, Ricardo Allen, Trey Flowers. To me, they would all be low priority guys, but they all had roles. Ricardo Allen was a rotational piece. Eli Apple should not be starting for this team next year. I apologize. He was paid like a backup. He did his job as a backup. If I'm the Bengals, I'm looking to get better at CB2.
Who are you apologizing to?
I don't know. To Eli, maybe. I don't know. Trey Flowers, another one that's interesting, is a guy that found a rotational job. But again, if I'm the Bengals, I really like my core in the secondary: Mike Hilton, Chidobe Awuzie, Jessie Bates, Von Bell. And I'm trying to find that other piece.
Yeah. Flowers and Apple, if he wants to delete social media.
Yeah.
They're fine backups. Like I'm fine bringing them back. But you obviously need to upgrade Trey Waynes, right? That's the spot. That's what Eli Apple, that's what he deserves credit for. He hid the Trey Waynes mistake for a lot of the year. But now you have to right that wrong, and you can't bank on Eli Apple doing that. And I already went in on him for the social media nonsense, so I don't need to do that again on this show. If you missed it, the end of Wednesday's show, you're in for a treat. You can check it out there. So that's how I view it, right? He hid that Trey Waynes issue because otherwise, and was an upgrade from LaShawn Sims in 2020. But now they need to find the next Trey Waynes, and that might be in the draft, right? And by that, what I mean a potential number one corner down the line, or a 1A along with Awuzie. And so that's what they need to find. Maybe it's the draft, maybe it's in free agency. That would be a lot of money to invest in the secondary, though, if you're paying Bates.
But they do.
Paying another corner. And they do. And they've prioritized it.
Yeah.
And they've prioritized it. And at 31, I could certainly see them, a corner being on the table. I haven't dove into it yet. I know some of the corners out there. I'm just saying could be. But if not, then I think they'll be very active, very aggressive to try to add a proven corner. And I think that's what Lou Anarumo likes anyways.
DB
so
guy.
would not be shocked at all if they go after a proven commodity. And then maybe they still bring back Eli Apple or someone. I don't think so, but you never know.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good group at corner in free agency. J.C. Jackson, Stephon Gilmore headlining it, but Carlton Davis, a younger guy, Charvarius Ward, who Bengals fans aren't very high on because Jamar Chase had a game against him, is a pretty solid corner from Kansas City. I think they'll try to bring him back. DJ Reed, Dante Jackson. These are some guys that are in free agency this year. Razul Douglas, still kicking around out there, had a great year.
If you could get DJ Reed to go with DJ Reader, that would be fun.
That'd be fun. That would be fun. Anyway, Those are the Bengals defensive free agents. The other guy we haven't discussed, James, is probably the most important free agent in the history of this franchise. That is Clark Harris. Protect Clark Harris, bring him back at all costs.
Kevin Huber?
Kevin Huber, I believe, is going to retire. That is a guess. But if I'm Kevin Huber, I guess you try to get paid because you're a punter, but
he told Dan Horde like a month ago he wanted to play next season. So
yeah. All right, there you go.
Maybe it changed, but
then if I'm the Bengals, I'm looking to get a little bit better at that spot.
Fair, yeah. I think that's why they've been flirting with Drew Chrisman so much this year.
Anyway, specialists we're not going to extend the show too long to talk about the specialists. We've been short lately. We went a little bit longer today with the Zac Taylor extension stuff and the conversation around Zac Taylor as a head coach. We'll talk more about that. It'd be fun to have a debate about that sometime. And I don't know, we probably have to find some guests, find some people with really strong opinions about this and about the play calling versus the locker room stuff and the chemistry. I think that could be fun. Maybe we'll do that at some point this offseason, talk about the extension, talk about the opinions of Zac Taylor and this coaching staff. But we got through all the free agents as well. And at some point, James, in the near future, is going to be time for a mock draft Monday. I don't know if it'll be next week, but it's coming. We haven't, I haven't said that. I mean, I've said it, but we haven't done it, man, in like over a year, right? Maybe not over a year because the draft was less than a year.
Not over
ago.
A year.
Yeah.
What are you drinking up there in Canada right now? I mean, goodness.
COVID time, man. COVID time is weird. Anyway, we might do a mailbag tomorrow, folks. We haven't done one for quite a while either. So keep your eyes out on the Locked On Bengals Twitter account in case we do. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo-day, and have a good one.